Welcome back to the channel and to our epic diesel square body Chevy S10 project. I'm Jimbo, and I'll be your 100% human narrator, fabricator, and engineer. Today, we're going to finally install the 1.6-liter Volkswagen engine into the '89 Chevy S10 pickup for the final time. And as a bonus, later on in this episode, we'll see the 5.7-liter manual transmission Camaro IROC-Z drive away. Sort of. Unfortunately, the clock is ticking this week, and I don't have a lot of time to get this diesel S10 ready for its first start, so let's just jump right into it. In the previous episode, we discovered a major problem with the thermostat housing. So the housing is supposed to fit the bottom side of the engine like this, but it won't work because it puts the outlet directly over the suspension crossmember. So our plan was to mount the thermostat housing backwards, and that would provide a clear path for the coolant hoses. Now the bad news is, doing it like that causes a bit of interference with the thermostat housing and this nub on the engine block. You see, this nub wants to poke a hole in the thermostat housing, which is less than ideal. So in order to make this work, we're going to have to cut this unused nub off the engine block. And that's going to allow us to mount the new thermostat housing without a hole in it, thus making the coolant system 100% leak-free. Let's get to it.
Dr. Jimbo, please report to operating room B. You have a patient waiting for a procedure.
So off camera, I prepped the patient for surgery, and today's procedure is going to be unnecessary nub removal. It's a quick and painless process for most Volkswagen engines. It turns out most of the effort is putting into keeping the area clean to avoid any grit from getting inside the engine. Now, grits for breakfast is fine for some people, but grit in the crankcase is never a good idea. So at this point, the thermostat housing fits the engine without any interference. Not too shabby. So the interference issue probably put a lot of stress on the water pump housing when it was test fitted and torqued down. It's hard to say if any of that stress did damage to the water pump housing, but it definitely screwed up the thermostat housing, that's for sure. So to avoid any drama, I bit the bullet and just replaced the water pump housing. So over here, I wanted to show you how the heater hose fits the engine. Basically, we have a short hose connected to a section of 3/4 inch electrical conduit that's bent in a 90-degree angle. You can get these 90-degree angle conduit sections at most home improvement stores. This arrangement will route the heater hose under the oil filter and gets it going in the right direction. I'll end up using another 90-degree chunk of conduit here to change the direction, and from that point, it's a straight shot to the heater core. So with the oil pan on the engine, I'm going to go ahead and dump in a gallon of oil. This engine hasn't been started in almost 2 years, and some fresh oil is exactly what it needs. Okay, so it's been a few minutes and let's check the oil level. Well, the good news is the gallon of oil put the dipstick at the full mark, which is great. Of course, the oil filter still needs to be filled, so it looks like this engine's going to use a little bit more than a gallon of oil. You know, this shaft is what spins the oil pump. Let's go ahead and spin this and prelude the engine. Fast forward a few minutes and I have the multimeter connected to the oil pressure switch. We should see the meter switch over to 0 ohms when we start making oil pressure. Let's give it a shot. Yep, we have oil pressure, and when I stop the drill, the oil pressure drops to nothing. That makes perfect sense. Let's do that again, and this time we'll get the oil pumping throughout the engine. That stuff on the camshaft is assembly lube, in case you were wondering. Yep, the oil is flowing. Very nice. It looks like the vacuum pump works, which is great news. I guess at this point, the plan is to let the engine sit overnight, and if there's no leaks, then we can install the engine in the truck tomorrow. Fast forward to tomorrow morning, and it appears there were 0 leaks overnight. That's awesome. At this point, it's time to assemble everything and get this engine ready to drop into the truck. The flywheel adapter is the first guy that gets installed. Now, the instructions for the kit I'm using covers all the details on how all this stuff goes together. I'm first going to install these bolts dry and snug them slightly to get the adapter to fully seat on the crankshaft. Then I'll remove the bolts and coat them with thread locking compound, and at that point I can install the bolts and torque them in. So off camera, I whipped up this crankshaft tool. It bolts to the front of the crankshaft and allows me to apply torque to all the bolts holding on the flywheel adapter and all the other bolts I'll need to torque down. This guy goes on next. The bolts that hold this in place will definitely get thread locker, and of course I'll torque them to spec. On this part, the length of the bolts are different and the instruction guide tells you where each of the bolts go. Fast forward a little bit and now I can install the transmission adapter plate. Once again, the bolts will get thread locker and torque to spec. You know, for more information on the kit that I'm using, check the video description. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other videos that I published that cover every single detail on this engine swap. The flywheel's been installed and torqued. Now I can give it a shot of brake clean and then I can install the clutch and pressure plate.
Boom! There it is.
This thing looks nothing like the Iron Duke that came out of the truck, but it bolts directly to the S10 chassis using all the factory mounts. When this truck wakes up from its engine transplant surgery, it'll have no idea that the Iron Duke is gone and its heart is now pumping diesel fuel. What a hell of a thing to wake up to. I wish I could look at this thing all day and pontificate on all the little details that make this fit in an S10, but the clock is ticking and I don't have much time left. So one last detail for the OCD folks. The starter pinion on this setup is totally exposed and there's the possibility of getting grit in the bell housing. Now if you click on the like button right now, I'll install this pinion shield and it'll cover all the doohickeys that some people worry about. But you have to click on the like button right now. That's all I ask. Fast forward many hours and the engine's in the truck. The motor mount bolts are in place and torqued. The transmission mount's been torqued down as well. The heater hoses have made their long journey from the far reaches of the engine bay and are now connected to the heater core. There's actually supposed to be a support bracket that goes on the intake manifold and it's going to hold the hoses from bouncing around, but it's not installed yet. Anyway, the starter's been wired for both the power and the signal from the ignition switch. At this point, connecting the system to a battery and turning the key will crank the engine over. In other news, the drive shaft's been installed and it fits perfectly. That's because we're still using the original drive shaft, the transmission, and transmission mount, so it really should fit. The hydraulic clutch linkage has been assembled, bled, and pushing on the clutch pedal causes the release arm to do its thing. Basically, all I have left to do is to install the injector pump, the timing belt, and tuck in a few wires, and this engine swap is 99% complete. Let's see how much I can get done in the remaining time. Well, the injector pump is in, so we can scratch that off the list. This pump has an unusual feature, and it has a cold start thingy that will advance the pump timing a little bit on cold starts. The feature is not automatic and it's operated by a cable, so I had a heck of a time figuring out how to mount and route the cable to the pump. Now, on the inside of the cab, on the transmission tunnel, I placed the push-pull cable. Now, this cable thingy runs underneath the truck and connects to the injector pump right here. This turns out to be a very difficult thing to get to with all the other junk in the way. Anyway, underneath the truck, I encapsulated the cable with a vinyl hose in order to prevent the cable from rusting. Just for fun, I also added some oil to the inside of the vinyl casing to keep the cable lubricated. This should keep the cable very happy for many years. So when this handle is lifted, we can enable the cold start feature. Now, this engine is also equipped with glow plugs for normal cold starts, and I reckon this feature's for colder starts or something like that. Now, advancing the injector pump is a cool feature. However, this feature only advances the pump timing in a narrow RPM range. Basically, from 0 to 1500 RPM, we can advance the pump timing. Now, above 1500 RPM, then the pump somehow reverts back to its base timing. This is what I read on the internet, so I'm not sure how true it is. Anyway, the pump was mounted in the same position it was when it was removed, and there are 4 bolts holding the pump in place. So loosening these bolts will allow me to advance or retard the pump timing a little bit. Now, back in the day when I had my Mercedes turbo diesel, I noticed that the engine liked a bit more advanced than the shop manual indicated, and I guess that was for emission reasons. This pump, well, it's easy to fiddle with, so yeah. Now on to the timing belt. When it comes to dealing with the timing belt on one of these engines, it's not my first rodeo, and I've done a few of these in the past. Back here, I have the camshaft locked with a homemade cam tool. And of course, this bolt is loose to allow the cam sprocket to rotate freely. On these engines, the cam is not keyed to the sprocket, and the bolt is the only thing that locks them together. For the injector pump, well, I'm using an 11mm Craftsman socket as an alignment tool. It works fine. Now on the crankshaft, I'm using a custom designed 3D printed crank alignment tool. On this vintage of an engine, there are no crank alignment tools available, and this engine was designed to be timed by lining up the marks on the flywheel. But since we've replaced the original flywheel with a Chevy flywheel, I no longer have access to the timing marks. This gizmo is something I whipped up on the 3D printer, and I tested it on this engine when it still had the original flywheel installed, so it's been verified. And my time is up. We are so close to firing this engine up, but I have places I need to be right now, and this is going to have to wait a few days. But first, let's do an update on the '88 Camaro IROC-Z. This car's been a complete mystery, and unfortunately the previous owner passed away while in the process of working on or repairing the car. What we do know is the car is equipped with a 5-speed transmission, which was never an option on IROCs with a 5.7-liter engine. So it's pretty clear this car has been modified, and it's not exactly stock. Under the hood is a genuine 350, or what's left of one. According to the decals and the VIN, this is truly a 350 car. Now, under all this debris, well, we discovered the engine was still in the car, but it had been exposed to copious amounts of feces and urine from a rodent of some sort. Over on this side of the engine, the aftermarket crane cam rocker arms are still in place, and it also appears this engine's equipped with aftermarket valve springs. Of course, you can also see the aftermarket headers poking out from the rubble. Very interesting. Fast forward a few weeks, and the engine bay is clean enough to eat off. It took a lot of work to get to this stage, and we did make a new discovery. On this side of the engine, the rocker arms and push rods were removed by the previous owner, which we already knew. However, it appears the previous owner also removed the hardware that holds this header in place. So there's a good chance this cylinder head was going to be removed for some unknown reason. It's hard to say why the cylinder head was in the process of being removed, and it could be for a repair or an upgrade. There's so many secrets hidden in this old Camaro. Fast forward a little bit and the car is moving again. This time around it's being powered by a 14 horsepower Briggs & Stratton. Yes, a Briggs swap would be epic on this Camaro, but unfortunately in this case the car is being towed with my 14 horsepower lawnmower. The Camaro is actually on its way over to my neighbor Nick's house, and Nick is going to be pulling the engine and transmission to see if the engine is salvageable. Well, by the time I got to Nick's house, the engine was already out. So this is interesting. The Camaro is equipped with subframe connectors, an adjustable torque arm, a mini high torque starter, a 3-inch exhaust system with a high flow converter, and a liquid to liquid oil cooler. So this car was built to run. Obviously, just judging by the Chevy orange paint, this engine's been out of the car in the past. A car of this vintage would normally have its engine painted black, so there are many more secrets yet to discover. Now, hanging off the back of the engine is a very nice surprise. I'm no expert, but this appears to be a T56. And unfortunately, I didn't see this tag when I was filming. I reckon it has all the information I desire, but judging from the size and the shape, it really looks like a T56. It does say Borg Warner right over here. So before, when I was shifting through the gears, I was only able to get 6 positions and one of them has to be reverse, so I figured it was a 5-speed. No matter what's going on, this particular transmission was never available in a 3rd generation Camaro, that's for sure. This thing is huge and it looks like it can certainly handle the torque of a warmed over small block. Now, according to the Googles, this guy is the reverse lockout solenoid. Now, Nick indicated that he didn't think this gizmo was connected. So, was the previous owner driving this rig without the ability to select reverse? More mysteries. Although Nick did solve the biggest mystery of all, and he said he found evidence this car was originally equipped with an automatic transmission, which makes sense because the 5.7-liter IROC was only available with the 700R4 transmission. Those were different times back then, and apparently offering a car with a decent engine meant you had to suffer with a silly automatic. Well, someone definitely took the time to build this car the right way, even if it didn't have reverse. I'm literally out of time, and this video has to get uploaded in a few minutes. We'll definitely dig into this engine in the next episode and see what's inside this cast iron mystery. A cam for sure, but what else? I'm sure you want to know as much as I do. I'll see you next time. Until then.